maybe head over there, have a look at one of the guns there, and then finish up in the two-story building.
It's really crazy how much changed. When we were touring, there was like 1,000 people in Toronto.
Yeah, there's about 500 meters of fill south of here. It began in the 1850s. They started to dredge out and use that material to expand the land to build railway tracks to where they were unloading ships. And then gradually over many decades into the 1920s and even later in some places. Anything south of Front Street in Toronto is basically filled in. Anything south of here has been filled in.
Crazy how much is
Yeah. People are often surprised. I mean, some people are aware that there was some filling in, but when they find out the extent of it.
Well, I have that old picture, and it looks like the lake is just right there.
Yeah. All these buildings are built up.
Garbage, I guess.
Yeah. Like at Tommy Thompson Park, you can actually see some of the
佢嗰度有啲木頭嗰度啊，個炮口唔係用石頭整，個炮身有啲黑道啊。
We get a lot of grade 7 classes here because that's when they learn about the War of 1812. And a popular question among grade 7 students seems to be, it's a cannon. Does it still work? I mean, this is a big iron tube. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't even have any moving parts. Yeah, you could put gunpowder inside and put a cannonball in there and explode it and the cannonball would shoot out. But that would probably not be safe given its age and potential for maybe cracks or pitting or something. So this gun has information on it. 24p, anybody? It's not the price. So this gun is classified as a 24 pounder. This iron tube, I don't know its exact weight, but it's thousands of pounds. But it could fire a solid iron ball weighing 24 pounds. So it's called a 24 pounder. Could fire other types of ammunition as well, and we'll see some of that when we go in the center blockhouse. Here is the sign of the British Board of Ordnance, what was called the Broad Arrow. That means this cannon is owned by the British Army, or was. Here is the cipher of King George III, GR with kind of fancy cursive under the crown. George III reigned from 1760 to 1820. This gun, as it says over here, was made at the Caron, C-A-R-R-O-N, Iron Works in 1797. And its serial number is 56737. So this gun would have been here during the battle. It would have had a different kind of carriage. This is a reproduction carriage. There's a bit more about gun carriages over on that sign there, but this type of carriage was used to support guns during peacetime because it's made of iron and will not decay quickly given the changes of weather and humidity and all of that. However, if you were to fire this gun a few times, you can see it's bolted together and it's going to jump back along this platform every time you fire it. So then you clean it out, reload it, pull it back into place. Someone was just remarking on the shoreline, and those of you who heard me at the beginning would have already heard a bit about this. But just to be clear, right about where the shadow of the Gardiner Expressway is there now, where that black fence line is, that's where there would have been a 4-meter drop, and then Lake Ontario. So for wartime, to use in a battle where you're planning to shoot this a few times, a wooden carriage would actually be able to take the impact of the recoil more better than this one. There's information about that on that side. Such a nice day. It seems like we could just do the whole thing. There is actually a lot to see in that building, so I do want to take you over there. Maybe just before we go there, I'll say something about Indigenous peoples for this area. It's important to remember, I think, that the British were relying on alliances with First Nations to defend British North America at that time. They were heavily committed to a war in Europe. They had an army in Spain fighting the French at the time of Napoleon. They didn't have a lot of extra soldiers to send over here. So they were also relying on local militia. But most importantly, I would say alliances with Indigenous people. If people know the name of Tecumseh, Tecumseh was a Shawnee chief. Shawnee Traditional Territory is parts of what's now Western Pennsylvania, Ohio, Illinois, Indiana. So many indigenous groups allied with the British. Maybe they didn't trust the British 100%, but they distrusted the United States more. And many of them were indigenous groups whose traditional territories are now part of the United States. When the British negotiated peace, they did not invite indigenous participation, nor did they represent their interests. And so the indigenous peoples didn't really get what they were hoping to get out of the line with the British. And just to be clear, there were some indigenous groups that actually fought with the United States at that time as well. So there's lots of conflicting reasons for these kinds of alliances. And then, of course, indigenous peoples were pushed into smaller and smaller reservations. There was a residential school system. Yeah. And so the importance of indigenous people, say, in military life or economic life in this part of the world declined significantly as the 19th century went on. Where we are now, this is Treaty 13 territory. You may be aware that there are numbered treaties in some parts of Canada that go back to agreements between indigenous groups and the British Crown, or indigenous groups and the Canadian federal government. We do have a map about treaty lands in Ontario in the middle room of that Soldiers Barracks building. Mm-hmm. We also have a free booklet written by indigenous peoples available in our shop about these treaties and treaty relationships. So Treaty 13 goes back to the Toronto Purchase of 1787. That's in the context of the British bringing refugees here from the United States. People who fought with the British against the Revolution, people who did not support the American Revolution, and then had to leave. So about 10,000 Loyalist refugees came up into what is now southern Ontario. Ontario and New Brunswick are two Canadian provinces that date from that influx of refugees from the American Revolution. But in order to bring those refugees here into what is now Toronto, the British had to negotiate with the Mississauga. So in 1787, they gave the Mississauga some trade goods and supplies, a little bit of money, various things typical of the kinds of gifts that were given to cement alliances, but also the kinds of goods and things that were involved in the fur trade that had been going on for many centuries already. There were issues surrounding the Toronto Purchase. There was an attempt to clarify that in 1805, which led to what we call Treaty 13. However, many of the issues that the Mississauga had were not addressed at that time. In the 1990s, the Mississauga brought forward some of their concerns, which led to a settlement with the Canadian federal government in 2010. So they got a settlement at that time, and Treaty 13 includes the Toronto Islands, downtown Toronto, and north to the Newmarket area. So, one of our most popular events is the powwow held in mid-June. This year it's going to be on Saturday, June 15th. I think there's a sign actually on the fence over there. And that is part of a 3-day Indigenous Arts Festival. A whole range of cultural activities and vendors and food put together, curated by the Mississauga of the Credit. In other words, the people with whom the Treaty 13 is negotiated. So that's a good day to come down here if you want to check out the powwow. It is our biggest event. The powwow itself will be on that Saturday, June 15th, out in the park area. Any thoughts or comments about Treaty 13 or Indigenous people? All right.
Hence the...
Sorry? Yes, Tecumseh. There's a street named after him up there. Yeah.
Oh.
Tecumseh had a battle in southwestern Ontario, closer to London.
I think I remember my history, but it's been a long time.
Well, Tecumseh was an important Indigenous leader at that time.